I was standing in my living room on a freezing January morning in Asheville, North Carolina, when I saw Brenda Cunningham marching across my lawn like she was leading a military invasion. That's when I knew my peaceful Saturday was about to go sideways. I had moved into the Pleasant Valley subdivision exactly 6 months ago, drawn by the mountain views and the promise of a quiet neighborhood where I could finally relax after years of working construction in Charlotte. My name is Peter Caldwell, and at 38 years old, I thought I had finally found my slice of heaven. The house was a modest 3-bedroom craftsman with a beautiful stone chimney that the previous owner had just had professionally rebuilt. I had every inspection report, every permit, every piece of documentation sitting in a file cabinet in my office. What I didn't account for was Brenda, the HOA president, who seemed to believe that her position gave her the authority to dictate how people breathed in their own homes. I watched through my front window as she stomped up to my door, her blonde bob bouncing with each aggressive step. She was wearing a purple tracksuit that looked expensive but somehow managed to look cheap on her, and her face was already red before she even reached my porch. I opened the door before she could knock, hoping to keep this civil. "Peter Caldwell," she said, not as a greeting but as an accusation. "Your chimney is creating a public nuisance and violating HOA regulations." I blinked at her. "Good morning to you too, Brenda. What are you talking about?" "The smoke," she hissed, pointing at my chimney like it was spewing toxic waste. "It's been pouring out of there all morning. Some of us are trying to enjoy our Saturday, and we don't need to smell your burning wood." I looked up at my chimney. Yes, there was smoke coming out of it. That's what happens when you burn wood in a fireplace. It was a clear, light smoke, barely visible against the gray January sky. "It's 30 degrees outside," I said calmly. "I'm using my fireplace. That's what it's for." "Well, it's disturbing the neighborhood," Brenda said, crossing her arms. "And I've reviewed the HOA bylaws. There are restrictions on creating odors that affect other properties." "Brenda, people have been burning wood in fireplaces for thousands of years. My chimney was just inspected before I bought the house. Everything is up to code." "I don't care about code," she snapped. "I care about HOA regulations, and as president I'm telling you to put that fire out immediately." I felt my jaw tighten. "No," her eyes went wide like I had just slapped her. "Excuse me," I said. "No, I'm not putting out my fire. It's legal, it's safe, and I'm doing nothing wrong." Brenda's face went from red to purple. "We'll see about that," she said, pulling out her phone. "If you won't listen to reason, maybe you'll listen to the authorities." "What are you doing?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew. "Calling 911, she said, already dialing. "There's a fire hazard in my neighborhood and the homeowner is refusing to address it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Brenda, 911 is for emergencies. You're going to call emergency services because you don't like that I'm using my fireplace." She held up one finger to silence me as someone apparently answered. "Yes, hello. I need to report a fire hazard. There's excessive smoke coming from a chimney at 847 Maple Ridge Drive in Pleasant Valley. The homeowner is refusing to address the situation, and I'm concerned about the safety of the neighborhood." I stood there in disbelief as she gave the dispatcher more information, embellishing the situation to make it sound like my house was about to explode. When she finally hung up, she had a triumphant look on her face. "The fire department will be here shortly," she said. "And when they see the violation, you'll be forced to comply." "There's no violation, Brenda. We'll let the professionals decide that." She turned and walked back toward her house, which was 4 doors down from mine. I went back inside and looked at my fireplace. The fire was burning cleanly, just like it had every other day that week. I had been burning seasoned oak that I had purchased from a local supplier, properly dried and ready to burn. The smoke was minimal, the heat was perfect, and everything was working exactly as it should. 20 minutes later, I heard sirens. Actual sirens. Brenda had managed to get a full fire truck dispatched to my house because she didn't like the smell of wood smoke. I walked outside to find an Asheville Fire Department truck pulling up in front of my house, and several of my neighbors had come out to see what the commotion was about. Great. Just what I needed. 2 firefighters got out, followed by someone in a different uniform who I assumed was the fire marshal. Brenda was already speed walking back over, clearly eager to witness my public humiliation. "I'm Fire Marshal Davies," the man said, extending his hand. He was in his 50s with graying hair and the calm demeanor of someone who had seen it all. "We got a call about a chimney fire." "There's no chimney fire," I said. "I'm just using my fireplace normally." "This is Brenda Cunningham. She's the HOA president, and she called you because she doesn't like that I'm burning wood." Marshal Davies looked at Brenda, then back at me. "So there's no active emergency?" "The emergency is that he's violating regulations," Brenda interjected. "The smoke is excessive and it's affecting the whole neighborhood." Marshal Davies sighed the sigh of a man who had dealt with this kind of thing before. "Madam, burning wood in a fireplace isn't illegal, but since we're here, let me take a look and make sure everything is safe and up to code." "Please do," I said, stepping aside. "I have all the inspection reports inside if you need them." The marshal and one of the firefighters followed me inside while the other firefighter stayed with the truck. Brenda tried to follow, but I stopped her at the door. "You can wait out here," I said. "I have a right to see what's happening," she protested. "No, actually, you don't. This is my private property." I closed the door before she could argue further. Marshal Davies walked over to my fireplace and examined it carefully. He looked at the flames, checked the damper, inspected the firebox, and even got down on his hands and knees to look up the chimney with a flashlight. "Wood looks properly seasoned," he commented. "Fire's burning clean. Damper is fully open." He stood up and brushed off his knees. "Can I see those inspection reports?" I pulled out the file folder from my office and handed it to him. Inside were the reports from when the chimney had been rebuilt 8 months ago, including the final inspection and code compliance certification from the city. Marshal Davies flipped through the pages, taking his time. "This was done by Morrison Masonry," he said. "Good outfit. They do quality work." He looked at me. "When did you move in?" 6 months ago. The chimney work was done right before the previous owner sold the house." He nodded and continued reading. After a few minutes, he closed the folder and handed it back to me. "Mr. Caldwell, your chimney is in full compliance with all fire codes. The construction is solid, the clearances are correct, and from what I can see, you're using it properly. There's no violation here." "Thank you," I said, feeling vindicated. "Can you please explain that to Brenda out there?" "I will, but I need to tell you something." He looked uncomfortable. "This is the 3rd false emergency call we've gotten in Pleasant Valley in the past 2 months. All of them were called in by the HOA president. We take every call seriously, but misusing 911 is actually a crime. If this continues, there could be consequences for her." I raised my eyebrows. "She's done this before. Twice. Once for a resident who was power washing their driveway early in the morning, which she claimed was creating a flood hazard. And once for someone's security lights, which she said were so bright they constituted a fire risk. Neither call had any merit." We walked back outside together. Brenda was standing on my lawn with her arms crossed, looking impatient. Several neighbors were still watching from their yards and windows. "Well," Brenda demanded, "did you cite him?" Marshal Davies turned to face her with an expression that could have frozen water. "Madam, there is no violation. Mr. Caldwell's chimney is in perfect working order and meets all fire codes. He is well within his rights to use his fireplace." "But the smoke," Brenda sputtered. "The smell, the pollution, is completely normal for a wood-burning fireplace," the marshal said firmly. "Madam, I need to inform you that calling 911 for non-emergencies is a misdemeanor offense. This is the third time you've called us out for situations that don't constitute emergencies. If it happens again, charges may be filed against you." Brenda's mouth fell open. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm informing you of the law," Marshal Davies said. "Emergency services are for emergencies, period." He turned back to me and handed me a business card. "If you have any actual concerns about your fireplace, feel free to call my office directly. But you're doing everything right." "Thank you, Marshal." The fire truck pulled away, and Brenda stood there looking like she had just bitten into a lemon. The neighbors who had been watching started to disperse, but I could see them talking among themselves. This was going to be the neighborhood gossip for weeks. "This isn't over," Brenda said quietly, her voice shaking with anger. "I will find a way to stop this." "Brenda, why are you making this such a big deal?" I asked, genuinely confused. "I'm just trying to heat my house." "Because I have asthma," she said. "The smoke triggers my asthma, and I shouldn't have to suffer in my own home because you're too cheap to turn on your heat." "I'm sorry about your asthma," I said, and I meant it. "But my house is 50 feet from yours and the smoke is going straight up. I don't think it's actually reaching your property." "It doesn't matter what you think," she said. "I'm the HOA president, and I will use every tool at my disposal to protect this neighborhood." She stormed off again, and I went back inside, hoping that would be the end of it. I should have known better. The next day, I found a letter in my mailbox. It was on official HOA letterhead and was signed by Brenda Cunningham in her capacity as president. The letter informed me that I was in violation of HOA Covenant Section 12, subsection 4, which prohibited the creation or maintenance of conditions that produce noxious odors, excessive noise, or other nuisances that materially interfere with the quiet enjoyment of other properties. The letter demanded that I cease using my fireplace immediately and attend a special HOA board meeting on the following Thursday to address the violation. If I failed to comply, I would be subject to daily fines of $50, escalating to $100 per day after 2 weeks. I read the letter 3 times, feeling my blood pressure rise with each reading. This was insane. She was actually trying to fine me for using my fireplace. I pulled out my copy of the HOA covenants and bylaws that I had received when I bought the house. I hadn't paid much attention to them at the time, figuring they were the standard rules about keeping your lawn maintained and not painting your house neon green. Now, I read through them carefully. Section 12. Subsection 4 did exist, but it was clearly written with things like leaving trash out or running a car repair business in mind. There was no reasonable interpretation that would include normal fireplace use. I also noticed that the bylaws required any enforcement action to be approved by a majority vote of the 3-member board, not just the president acting alone. I decided to do some research. I drove to the county clerk's office on Monday morning and pulled up the property records for Pleasant Valley. The subdivision had been established in 2008, and the HOA bylaws had been filed with the original developer's documents. I made copies of everything. I also made some calls. I found out that the other 2 members of the HOA board were Marcus Henderson, who lived 3 streets over, and Patricia Wolfe, who lived on the opposite side of the subdivision from me. I didn't know either of them personally, but I got their contact information from the HOA directory. Marcus answered on the second ring. Hello. Hi, Mr. Henderson. This is Peter Caldwell. I live on Maple Ridge Drive. I'm calling because I received a letter from Brenda Cunningham about an HOA violation, and I wanted to discuss it with the board. Oh, man, Marcus groaned. What did she do now? You mean this happens a lot? Let's just say Brenda has a very creative interpretation of the HOA rules, Marcus said. What's she claiming this time? I explained the situation with the fireplace, the 911 call, and the fire marshal's visit. Marcus listened quietly, occasionally making sounds of disbelief. She can't fine you for using your fireplace, he said when I finished. That's ridiculous. And she definitely can't send out enforcement letters without board approval. That's in the bylaws. So what can I do? Come to the meeting on Thursday, Marcus said. I'll be there and I'll make sure Patricia is there too. We'll shut this down. I called Patricia next and got a similar reaction. She was a retired teacher in her 60s who had apparently been battling with Brenda over various issues for the past year. Brenda thinks being HOA president makes her queen of the neighborhood, Patricia said. She's been trying to control everything from what color flowers people can plant to what time they can water their lawns. The rest of us are getting tired of it. Thursday evening came, and I drove to the community center where HOA meetings were held. It was a small building near the entrance to the subdivision, with a meeting room that could hold maybe 50 people. I expected a handful of people to show up. Instead, I walked into a room packed with at least 40 residents, all talking animatedly among themselves. Apparently, word had gotten around about Brenda's latest crusade, and people were interested. Brenda sat at a table at the front of the room with Marcus and Patricia on either side of her. She looked surprised and not particularly happy about the turnout. Marcus gave me a small nod when I walked in. At 7 o'clock sharp, Brenda banged a gavel on the table. This special meeting of the Pleasant Valley HOA Board is now in session. The purpose of this meeting is to address a violation by Peter Caldwell of 847 Maple Ridge Drive. Point of order, Patricia said immediately. Before we discuss any alleged violation, I'd like to address the fact that you called this special meeting and issued an enforcement letter without consulting the other board members. That's not proper procedure. Brenda's jaw tightened. As president, I have the authority to act quickly when there's a threat to the community. No, you don't, Marcus said, pulling out a copy of the bylaws. Section 19 clearly states that enforcement actions require a majority vote of the board. You can't just unilaterally decide someone is in violation. The violation is obvious, Brenda said. Multiple residents have complained about the smoke from Mr. Caldwell's fireplace. Actually, I said, standing up, I'd like to hear from these other residents. Who else has complained? Silence. Brenda looked around the room, clearly expecting someone to speak up. No one did. Well, I pressed. Brenda claims multiple residents have complained. I'd like to know who they are. Complaint records are confidential, Brenda said quickly. Convenient, Marcus muttered. A man in his 50s stood up in the back row. I live next door to Pete. I haven't complained about anything. His fireplace doesn't bother me at all. A woman across the room raised her hand. I'm 2 houses down from him. I can barely even see his chimney, let alone smell anything from it. More people started speaking up, most of them saying they had no issue with my fireplace use. One elderly man actually said he liked the smell of wood smoke because it reminded him of his childhood. Brenda's face was getting redder by the second. Just because they're not complaining now doesn't mean it's not a problem. The smoke is a health hazard. According to whom? Patricia asked. Do you have any documentation supporting that claim, any air quality tests, any medical reports? I have asthma, Brenda said. The smoke triggers my asthma. I'm sorry about your asthma, I said, genuinely meaning it. But my house is 50 feet from yours, and the prevailing winds in this area blow to the east, away from your property. The fire marshal confirmed that my chimney meets all codes and is functioning properly. I brought a copy of his report if anyone wants to see it. I held up the documentation that Marshal Davies had given me, along with the original inspection reports from when the chimney was rebuilt. Marcus reached out. I'd like to see that. I brought the papers up to the table. Marcus and Patricia reviewed them carefully while Brenda sat with her arms crossed, fuming. Everything looks legitimate, Patricia said. The chimney passed inspection. It meets code and the fire marshal found no violations. I don't see any basis for HOA enforcement action. I move that we dismiss the alleged violation, Marcus said. I second that motion, Patricia said immediately. You can't do that, Brenda protested. Yes, we can, Marcus said. All in favor, Patricia raised her hand. Marcus raised his hand. I opposed, Marcus asked, looking at Brenda. Brenda didn't say anything, but her expression could have melted steel. Motion passes 2-1, Marcus said. Mr. Caldwell, you're not in violation of any HOA rules. The enforcement letter is rescinded and there will be no fines. A few people in the audience actually clapped. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. This is a mistake, Brenda said, her voice tight with anger. You're setting a dangerous precedent. If we allow this, what's next? Bonfires, fire pits. The whole neighborhood could be filled with smoke. Brenda, Patricia said, her teacher voice coming through. A properly functioning fireplace used for its intended purpose is not a violation. If you want to propose new rules about fireplaces, you can bring that up at a regular meeting and the membership can vote on it. But you cannot retroactively enforce rules that don't exist. Fine, Brenda said, standing up abruptly. Is there any other business? Actually, yes, Marcus said. I'd like to discuss the fact that you've been sending out enforcement letters without board approval. This is the 4th time this year that we've had to overturn your unilateral decisions. It needs to stop. I'm doing my job, Brenda said defensively. Your job is to manage the HOA according to the bylaws, not to harass residents, Patricia said. If this continues, we may need to consider a vote of no confidence. Brenda grabbed her papers and stuffed them into her bag. This meeting is adjourned, she announced, and stormed out of the room. Marcus and Patricia looked at each other and shook their heads. Several residents came up to talk to me afterward, offering support and sharing their own stories of dealing with Brenda's overreach. Apparently, I was just the latest in a long line of people who had been targeted. I drove home that night feeling vindicated but also uneasy. Brenda had been publicly embarrassed and overruled. Something told me this wasn't over. I was right. The following Monday, I came home from work to find a citation from the City of Asheville Code Enforcement Office attached to my door. It claimed that I was operating a commercial firewood burning operation without proper permits, and that I had 30 days to cease operations or face penalties. I stared at the citation in disbelief. This was clearly Brenda's doing. I wasn't operating any kind of commercial operation. I was just using my fireplace. I called the number on the citation and reached a woman named Sandra in the Code Enforcement Office. Hi, I received a citation about a commercial firewood operation, but I think there's been a mistake. I'm just a homeowner using my fireplace. Let me pull up your file, Sandra said. I heard typing. Okay, yes, we received a complaint from a Brenda Cunningham claiming that you were selling firewood and burning excessive amounts, creating a commercial nuisance. That's completely false, I said. I buy firewood for my personal use. I'm not selling anything to anyone. Do you have receipts for your firewood purchases? Sandra asked. Yes, I have all my receipts. Bring them to our office along with any documentation about your chimney and fireplace. We'll review everything, and if the complaint is unfounded, we'll dismiss the citation. I took a half-day off work on Wednesday and went to the code enforcement office with a folder full of documentation. Receipts from the firewood supplier showing I had purchased 2 cords of wood for personal use. The chimney inspection reports. Photos of my modest woodpile in the backyard that was clearly for personal use, not commercial sale. Even my property deeds showing I was a residential homeowner. Sandra reviewed everything carefully. Mr. Caldwell, it's pretty clear you're not running a business. I'm going to dismiss this citation and note in our system that the complaint was unfounded. Can I ask what happens when someone files a false complaint? I asked. Sandra's expression became sympathetic. Unfortunately, we have to investigate every complaint we receive, even if it seems questionable. If someone repeatedly files false complaints, we can pursue charges for filing a false report, but it has to be pretty egregious. This is the second false complaint this person has filed, I said. She also called 911 claiming there was a fire hazard when there wasn't one. Sandra made a note on her computer. I'll document that. If she continues, it will help build a case. I left the office feeling frustrated. Brenda was wasting everyone's time and taxpayer resources because of her personal vendetta against my fireplace. When I got home, I found my next-door neighbor, Tom Riley, standing in his driveway. Tom was a retired veteran in his late 60s who had lived in the neighborhood since it was built. "Hey, Pete," he called out. "Got a minute?" "Sure, what's up?" Tom looked uncomfortable. "I wanted to give you a heads up. Brenda came by my house yesterday asking if I'd be willing to sign a petition against your fireplace use. Said she was gathering signatures to bring to the city council." "Did you sign it?" "Hell no," Tom said. "I told her she was being ridiculous and that you weren't doing anything wrong, but she said she was going to every house in the subdivision. Thought you should know." "Thanks for telling me," I said. "Did she say anything else?" "She went on a rant about how people like you are ruining the neighborhood and that someone needs to stand up for proper standards. Honestly, Pete, the woman has gone off the deep end. She tried the same kind of thing with the Johnsons last year when they wanted to install solar panels. Eventually, she gave up, but she made their lives miserable for months. That evening, I decided to be proactive. I typed up a letter explaining the situation and including copies of the fire marshal's report, the code enforcement dismissal, and the HOA board's decision. I walked around the neighborhood and put a copy in every mailbox on my street and the 2 adjacent streets. The letter was polite but firm. I explained that Brenda was circulating false information and that all official authorities had confirmed I was not in violation of any rules or regulations. I included my phone number and invited anyone with genuine concerns to call me directly. The next day, I got several calls. Most were supportive. A few people admitted that Brenda had approached them about the petition and they had refused to sign. One woman, Helen Morrison, told me that Brenda had actually lied to her, claiming that the fire marshal had cited me for violations when the opposite was true. "That's when I knew she was making things up," Helen said. "I've lived here for 12 years and Brenda has been getting worse every year. She thinks she runs this place like her personal fiefdom." By the end of the week, I found out that Brenda had managed to get exactly 3 signatures on her petition, and 2 of those people called me afterward to apologize, saying Brenda had misrepresented the situation to them. I thought maybe Brenda would finally give up. Instead, Things escalated on Saturday morning. I woke up to the sound of someone pounding on my door. I looked at the clock and it said 6:30. I pulled on some clothes and went to the door, expecting maybe an emergency or a delivery driver who had the wrong address. It was Brenda, and she looked absolutely unhinged. Her hair was messy. She was wearing a bathrobe and her eyes were wild. "You need to put out that fire right now," she screamed. "Right now? I can't breathe. You're poisoning me." "Brenda, I don't have a fire going," I said, which was true. I hadn't started my fireplace yet that morning. "Don't lie to me. I can smell the smoke. You're trying to kill me." I stepped out onto my porch and looked at my chimney. No smoke. I looked around the neighborhood and spotted smoke coming from a chimney 3 houses down. The Martins had a fire going. "Brenda, that's not my chimney. Look." I pointed at the Martins' house. She looked, but her expression didn't change. "You're all in on it. The whole neighborhood is conspiring to poison me." "Brenda, I think you need to go home and calm down," I said carefully. "Maybe call someone to talk to." "I know what you're doing," she said, her voice dropping to an intense whisper. "You're all trying to drive me out. You want me to leave so you can turn this neighborhood into a slum, but I won't let you. I'll fight you all." She turned and walked away, muttering to herself. I watched her go, genuinely concerned now. This had gone beyond HOA power trips. Brenda seemed to be having some kind of breakdown. I called Marcus Henderson and told him what had happened. He sighed heavily. "She came to my house at midnight last night," Marcus said. Banging on the door, screaming about smoke. "Pete, I don't have a fireplace. I don't even have a chimney. My house is all electric heat." "Has anyone contacted her family?" I asked. "She's divorced and her kids live out of state." Patricia tried calling her daughter last week, but the daughter said Brenda won't listen to her and hung up. "This is getting serious, Marcus. She seems genuinely unstable." "I know. Patricia and I are planning to call an emergency board meeting to discuss removing her as president. We just need to do it right, according to the bylaws." The emergency board meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday. I wasn't on the board, so I couldn't attend, but Marcus promised to call me afterward. That week was relatively quiet. I saw Brenda a few times from a distance, but she didn't approach me. I continued using my fireplace normally, though I found myself checking over my shoulder more often than I liked. Thursday evening came. I was sitting in my living room watching television when my phone rang at 8:30. It was Marcus. "We did it," he said. "We voted to remove Brenda as president. It was 2 votes to 1, obviously. Patricia is taking over as interim president until we can hold elections." "How did Brenda take it?" "Not well. She screamed at us for 20 minutes, claiming we were part of a conspiracy. Then she said something about making us all pay and stormed out." "Pete, I'm a little worried about what she might do." "You think she might do something crazy?" "I don't know. But I'm going to suggest at the next general meeting that we hire professional management for the HOA. This volunteer board thing isn't working anymore." We talked for a few more minutes, then hung up. I felt relieved that Brenda had been removed from power, but also anxious about what might come next. I found out the next morning. I left for work at 7 in the morning like usual. When I came home at 5:30 that evening, I immediately noticed something was wrong. My front door was standing open about 6 inches. I know I had closed and locked it when I left that morning. I always did. I approached carefully, my heart pounding. I called out, "Hello, anyone there?" No answer. I pushed the door open slowly and stepped inside. The living room looked normal. The kitchen looked normal. But when I walked toward my office, I saw it. Papers were scattered everywhere. My file cabinets were open, with folders pulled out and thrown on the floor. My desk drawers had been emptied. Someone had gone through my office and made a mess of everything. I immediately backed out and called the police from my driveway. 2 officers arrived within 10 minutes. "Did you check the whole house?" The first officer, Officer Ramirez, asked. "No, I came back outside as soon as I saw the office." They cleared the house while I waited outside. After a few minutes, they came back out. "Whoever was here is gone now," Officer Ramirez said, "but you should come inside and see if anything is missing." I went through the house room by room. The office was the only room that had been disturbed. My television was still there, my laptop was still on my desk. My wallet that I had left in the bedroom was untouched. Nothing of value seemed to be missing. But when I looked more carefully at what had been disturbed, I realized something. All of the paperwork that had been pulled out and thrown around was related to my house, the chimney, the HOA, and the various complaints and violations that Brenda had filed. "This wasn't a robbery," I said slowly. "Someone was looking through my documents about the HOA." Officer Ramirez frowned. "Why would someone do that?" I explained the whole situation with Brenda, the HOA battle, her increasingly erratic behavior, and the fact that she had been removed as president just the night before. "You think she did this?" the other officer, Officer Park, asked. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but the timing is suspicious." The officers took photos and dusted for fingerprints, though they warned me that in the absence of clear evidence, it would be hard to prove who had done it. "Your front door lock wasn't forced," Officer Ramirez noted. "Does anyone else have a key to your house?" "Just my parents, and they live in Tennessee." "You might want to change your locks anyway," Officer Park suggested, "and consider installing a security camera system." After the police left, I called Marcus and told him what had happened. He was silent for a long moment. "Pete, I don't want to accuse anyone without proof, but I should tell you something. Brenda was the HOA president when you bought your house. Part of the closing process included giving a set of keys to the HOA for emergency access. It's in the bylaws." "You're kidding." I wish I was. Technically, those keys are supposed to be kept in a lockbox at the community center, only to be used if there's an emergency and we can't reach a homeowner, but Brenda had access to them, so she could have a copy of my house key. It's possible. I hung up and immediately called a locksmith. They couldn't come until the next morning, so I spent an uncomfortable night in my house, very aware that someone had been inside and might have the ability to come back. The locksmith came first thing Saturday morning and changed all my locks. While he was working, I saw Brenda drive past my house slowly, looking at all the activity. She didn't stop or wave, just kept driving. That afternoon, I went to a home security store and bought a comprehensive camera system. 4 outdoor cameras covering all sides of the house and 2 indoor cameras for the main living areas. I spent the rest of the weekend installing them and setting up the monitoring app on my phone. Sunday evening, I got alerts from my parents about some concerning posts on the neighborhood's private social media group. My mom was friends with Helen Morrison, who had added my mom to the group so she could see what was happening. I logged in and found multiple posts from Brenda, all written in the past 2 hours. They were becoming increasingly unhinged. "Peter Caldwell is a threat to this neighborhood. He refuses to follow rules and thinks he's above everyone else. Someone needs to stop him before he destroys everything we've built here. The so-called HOA board is corrupt. They removed me because I was the only one willing to stand up for what's right. They're all in Caldwell's pocket. I have evidence of illegal activity. When I present it to the authorities, everyone will see the truth." The posts went on and on, each one more paranoid and accusatory than the last. Several residents had commented, trying to calm her down or suggesting she take a break from social media. She responded to each with more accusations. I screenshot everything and sent copies to Marcus and Patricia. I also decided to document everything going forward. If Brenda was spiraling, I needed to protect myself. Monday at work, I got a call from my home security system. Motion detected at the front door. I pulled up the camera feed on my phone and watched as Brenda walked up to my front door, tried the handle, found it locked, and then peered through my front window with her hand shading her eyes. She stood there for a minute, then walked around the side of my house, disappearing from the front camera's view. I switched to the side camera and watched her try to look in my windows, walking all the way around the house before returning to the front. She tried my front door handle one more time, then left. I saved all the video footage and sent it to Officer Ramirez with an email explaining what had happened. He called me back an hour later. "Mr. Caldwell, this is concerning behavior. Combined with the break-in, I think we have enough to bring her in for questioning. Can you come down to the station after work and file a formal statement?" "Absolutely." That evening, I went to the police station and filed a detailed statement, including all the video evidence, the timeline of events, and the context of the HOA dispute. Officer Ramirez told me they would contact Brenda and ask her to come in for an interview. Tuesday morning, I was drinking coffee when my security system alerted me again. This time it was two officers, Ramirez and Park, walking up to my door. I answered immediately. "Mr. Caldwell, we need to talk to you about Brenda Cunningham," Officer Ramirez said. "Did you interview her?" "We tried. When we went to her house last night, she refused to answer the door. We could see her inside, but she wouldn't engage with us. This morning, we got a call from one of her neighbors. They saw her loading multiple large containers into her car around 6 in the morning." "What kind of containers?" "That's what we want to ask you about. Can you check your property and tell us if anything seems unusual? Specifically, check around your house, your yard, and your woodpile." That was oddly specific. I followed the officers outside and walked around my property. Everything looked normal until I got to my woodpile in the backyard. "Oh no," I said. "What is it?" Officer Park asked. "My woodpile, it's soaked, like completely drenched." I touched the wood. It was wet through and there was a strong chemical smell. "What is this? It smells like gasoline." The officers exchanged glances. "Don't touch anything else," Officer Ramirez said. "We need to call this in." Within an hour, my backyard was full of people. Police officers, fire investigators, and someone from the county hazmat team. They tested the liquid on my woodpile and confirmed it was indeed gasoline. "Mr. Caldwell," Fire Marshal Davies said, appearing at my side. "We meet again, unfortunately. Can you think of any reason someone would pour gasoline on your firewood to ruin it?" I suggested. "Or maybe to make it dangerous to burn." "That's what concerns us," Davies said. "If you had brought this wood inside and burned it without realizing it was soaked in gasoline, you could have had a serious fire. The vapors alone could have caused an explosion." I felt sick. "You think Brenda did this?" "We can't say for certain yet, but we're treating this as a criminal investigation. Attempted arson is a serious charge." They took samples of the gasoline-soaked wood and searched my property for any other hazards. They also checked my chimney and fireplace to make sure nothing had been tampered with inside the house. The investigation continued for hours. Neighbors came out to watch and ask questions. Tom Riley came over and stood with me while the police worked. "Pete, this is crazy," Tom said. "I knew Brenda was difficult, but this is criminal." "I just wanted to use my fireplace," I said, feeling exhausted. "How did it come to this?" Late in the afternoon, Officer Ramirez came over to give me an update. "We've been trying to locate Brenda Cunningham all day. Her car is gone, and neighbors say they haven't seen her since early this morning. We've issued a bolo for her vehicle and we're in contact with her family. You think she ran? We don't know, but we have enough evidence now to obtain a warrant for her arrest. The security footage showing her on your property, combined with the gasoline attack and the earlier break-in, gives us probable cause. I spent that night at a hotel, not feeling safe in my own house. The police had cleared my property and said there was no ongoing danger, but I couldn't shake the feeling of violation. Wednesday morning, I got a call from Officer Ramirez. We found her. Where? She was pulled over in South Carolina, about 2 hours from Asheville. She was driving erratically and a highway patrol officer stopped her. When they ran her information, the warrant came up. She's being held there pending extradition back to North Carolina. What happens now? She'll be charged with criminal trespass, attempted arson, and we're still investigating the break-in. The DA will review everything and determine the full list of charges. You'll probably need to testify. Whatever it takes, I said. Over the next few days, the story spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Everyone knew what had happened. I got calls and visits from neighbors expressing support and disbelief. Many shared their own stories of Brenda's increasingly controlling behavior over the years. Marcus and Patricia came by with a fruit basket and an apology on behalf of the HOA. We should have done something sooner, Patricia said. We knew she was getting out of control, but we never imagined it would go this far. It's not your fault, I assured them. Nobody could have predicted this. Still, Marcus said, we're implementing some changes. We're hiring a professional property management company to handle HOA business. And we're revising the bylaws to add better checks and balances so one person can never have this much power again. A week later, Brenda was extradited back to North Carolina. She was formally charged with criminal trespass, attempted arson, and criminal mischief. The break-in charge was added after forensics found her fingerprints on my file cabinet. Her lawyer tried to argue that she was having a mental health crisis and wasn't responsible for her actions. The DA agreed to order a psychiatric evaluation, but maintained that the charges should stand. I had to replace my entire woodpile, which cost me several $100s. The insurance covered some of it, and surprisingly, the HOA voted to reimburse me for the rest as a gesture of goodwill. The criminal case moved slowly, as they always do. 3 months after the incident, I was called to testify at a preliminary hearing. I walked through everything that had happened, from the first confrontation about the fireplace smoke to the final gasoline attack. Brenda was there in the courtroom, looking diminished somehow. She avoided eye contact with me the entire time. Her lawyer presented the psychiatric evaluation, which diagnosed her with several mental health conditions that had apparently been worsening over the past few years. The judge listened to everything, then made a ruling. Brenda would enter a plea agreement. She would plead guilty to criminal trespass and criminal mischief, and the attempted arson charge would be reduced to reckless endangerment. She would serve 6 months in county jail, followed by 2 years of probation. She was also required to undergo continued psychiatric treatment and was prohibited from serving in any HOA leadership position ever again. Additionally, she was ordered to pay restitution to me for the damaged firewood and to cover the cost of my new security system. I felt a mix of relief and sadness when I heard the sentence. Relief that it was over, but sadness that someone had spiraled so badly over something so minor. After the hearing, Brenda's daughter approached me in the courthouse hallway. She was a woman in her 30s with tired eyes. "Mr. Caldwell, I want to apologize for what my mother did to you," she said. "I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that the person who did these things wasn't who my mother used to be. She's been struggling with mental health issues for years, but she refused to get help. She thought she could handle everything on her own. "I appreciate you telling me that," I said. "I'm sorry your family is going through this. Mom is getting the help she needs now. Whether she wanted it or not, she's finally in treatment. Maybe some good can come from all this." The case finally closed 6 months later when Brenda completed her jail sentence and began her probation. She sold her house in Pleasant Valley and moved to an assisted living facility in another county where she could receive ongoing care. The neighborhood slowly returned to normal. The new professional management company took over HOA operations and things ran much more smoothly. Marcus and Patricia remained on the board but with clearly defined limits on their authority. As for me, I continued to use my fireplace throughout that winter and every winter since. The new HOA management actually sent out a newsletter reminding residents that properly maintained fireplaces were an approved amenity and encouraging people to enjoy them. I added more security features to my house, not because I felt particularly unsafe, but because the experience had taught me the value of documentation. The cameras stayed up, and I kept all my important documents in a fireproof safe. Tom Riley and I became good friends. We often sat on one of our porches on cold evenings, watching the smoke from our respective chimneys rise into the night sky, and talking about everything from sports to politics, to the importance of standing up for yourself when someone tries to control you. The story became something of a legend in Pleasant Valley. New residents would hear about the HOA president who went to war over a fireplace and ended up in jail. It served as a cautionary tale about the dangers of letting petty power go to one's head and the importance of maintaining perspective. One thing I learned from the whole experience was the importance of documentation. Every email, every letter, every interaction I had carefully recorded had been crucial in proving my case. The security camera footage had been the key evidence that led to Brenda's arrest. I also learned about the importance of community. The support I received from neighbors like Tom and Helen and from board members like Marcus and Patricia had been invaluable. It's easy to feel isolated when you're being targeted, but I wasn't alone. The final piece of the story came a year after everything happened. I received a letter in the mail from Brenda. It was short and written in shaky handwriting. "Mr. Caldwell, I want to apologize for what I put you through. I was not well, and I let my fears and need for control override my judgment and humanity. You were just trying to live your life, and I made you feel unsafe in your own home. I can never fully make that right, but I want you to know that I am working on myself and I am deeply sorry. I hope you can find peace. Brenda Cunningham." I read the letter several times. I thought about responding but ultimately decided not to. I hoped Brenda found the help she needed, but I didn't need to be part of her recovery journey. Some chapters of life need to be closed and left closed. I folded the letter and put it in my safe with all the other documents from that time. Not as something to hold on to, but as a reminder that conflicts can escalate in unexpected ways, and that standing up for yourself is important, but so is recognizing when someone is struggling with deeper issues. That winter, I sat by my fireplace many evenings, watching the flames dance and listening to the wood crackle. The smoke rose up through my code-compliant chimney and dispersed into the winter air, just as it was designed to do, just as I had every right to allow it to do. Sometimes I thought about that first morning when Brenda marched across my lawn, convinced that my fireplace smoke was a personal attack on her. If she had just knocked on my door like a neighbor and talked to me like a human being, maybe we could have found some compromise. Maybe I could have burned fires at certain times of day, Or maybe we could have determined that her asthma wasn't actually being triggered by my chimney at all. But she had chosen confrontation and control instead of conversation and compromise. And that choice had cost her everything: her position, her home, her freedom for a time, and her place in the community. As for me, I stayed in my house in Pleasant Valley. I maintained my yard according to the reasonable HOA rules, attended the occasional community meeting, and waved to my neighbors when I saw them. I used my fireplace when it was cold, confident in the knowledge that I was doing nothing wrong. The community center, where the fateful HOA meetings had taken place, eventually got a new name. Someone suggested calling it the Caldwell Commons as a joke, but Patricia immediately shot that down. Instead, it became the Pleasant Valley Community Center, with updated bylaws posted prominently in the lobby reminding everyone that HOAs exist to serve communities, not to give individuals power over their neighbors. Years later, I would sometimes tell the story at dinner parties or when people asked why I had such an extensive security system. It always got reactions, people laughing at some parts, shocked at others, and thoughtful at the end. What would you have done differently? Someone once asked me. I thought about it. Nothing, I finally said. I was using my property legally and appropriately. I tried to be reasonable. I documented everything. I went through the proper channels. Sometimes you do everything right and still end up in a crazy situation because of someone else's issues. All you can do is protect yourself and stand your ground. That became my philosophy, not just about HOA disputes, but about life in general. Stand up for yourself, document everything, seek support from your community, and try to remember that sometimes the people causing problems are fighting battles you can't see. But also, change your locks. Definitely change your locks. The firewood that replaced my gasoline-soaked pile burned cleanly and well for the rest of that winter. I bought from the same supplier, a local guy named Dave who delivered seasoned oak and hickory in his old pickup truck. When I told him what had happened, he just shook his head. "People get weird about firewood," he said. "I had one customer whose neighbor complained because she said the woodpile was ugly. Another time, someone claimed my delivery truck was too loud. But this takes the cake. Gasoline on firewood, that's not just crazy, that's dangerous." "Tell me about it," I said. As the months and years passed, the incident faded from immediate memory but remained as part of the neighborhood's history. New HOA board members were elected, and they all knew the story. It influenced how they approached their duties, with more emphasis on communication and less on enforcement. The professional management company that took over HOA operations implemented a conflict resolution process. If a resident had a complaint about a neighbor, there was now a formal mediation procedure before any enforcement action could be taken. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. I eventually became friends with some of the people who moved into the neighborhood after the incident. They were always surprised when they heard the story because Pleasant Valley seemed like such a quiet, peaceful place. Which it was, really. The situation with Brenda had been an aberration, a perfect storm of mental health struggles, personal issues, and unchecked authority. One thing I never expected was the impact the story would have beyond Pleasant Valley. A local newspaper picked up on it after the court case concluded, and it became a minor news story. Then, a regional news website wrote about it. Eventually, it got featured on one of those social media pages that shares wild HOA stories. I started getting messages from people all over the country who had dealt with similar HOA nightmares. Some were worse than mine, some weren't quite as bad, but all of them shared a common thread. Someone with a small amount of power had let it go to their head and made life miserable for others. I responded to a few of the messages, offering advice based on my experience. Document everything. Know your rights. Read your HOA bylaws carefully. Get your neighbors on your side. Don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. Some people asked if I regretted moving to an HOA neighborhood. The answer was no. Even after everything that happened, I loved my house and my neighborhood. The HOA, when functioning properly, did good things. They maintained the common areas, organized neighborhood events, and helped preserve property values. The problem wasn't the concept of an HOA, it was the specific person who had abused her position. With Brenda gone and proper management in place, the HOA worked the way it was supposed to work. It was a service, not a ruling body. I kept in touch with Marcus and Patricia for years after. Marcus eventually moved to Florida to be closer to his grandchildren, but Patricia stayed in Pleasant Valley until she passed away peacefully at age 78. At her memorial service, several people mentioned how she had stood up to Brenda and helped restore sanity to the HOA. It was part of her legacy in the community. Tom Riley remained my closest friend in the neighborhood until he died at age 73 from a heart attack. I was the one who found him, actually. I went over to borrow a tool and found him in his garage, already gone. It was sudden and painless, which is how Tom would have wanted it. At his funeral, his son thanked me for being such a good friend to his father in his final years. Life continued in Pleasant Valley. Seasons changed, firewood was burned, smoke rose from chimneys, and the world kept turning. The incident with Brenda became one of those stories that defined a moment in time, but didn't define the place itself. I never heard from Brenda again after that one letter. I looked her up once, a few years later, and found out she was still living in the assisted living facility, participating in therapy and activities there. Her daughter posted occasional updates on social media, and it seemed like Brenda was doing better, though she would likely need support for the rest of her life. I hoped she had found some peace. Not for her sake, really, but for the sake of her family, and for the principle that people deserve the chance to get better, even after they've done terrible things. As for me, I aged into middle age in my house in Pleasant Valley. My hair started to gray at the temples. I got promoted at work. I dated occasionally, though nothing serious stuck. My life was quiet and content, which after the drama with Brenda felt like exactly what I needed. Every time I started a fire in my fireplace, I thought briefly about that whole experience. But it didn't haunt me or make me angry anymore. It was just something that had happened, a story to tell, a lesson learned. The real victory wasn't that Brenda had been punished or that I had been vindicated. The real victory was that I could sit in my living room on a cold winter night, watch the flames dance in my fireplace, and feel completely at peace. My home was my own. I was safe. I was free to live my life without harassment or fear. That's all any of us really want, isn't it? To live peacefully in our own space, to be left alone to enjoy the simple things like a warm fire on a cold night, to be treated with basic respect and fairness. The incident taught me that these simple things are worth fighting for. Not with violence or vengeance, but with documentation, persistence, and the courage to stand up for yourself through proper channels. The system worked eventually. It was messy and took time, but justice prevailed. And every winter, when I stacked my firewood and prepared for the cold months ahead, I appreciated it a little more. The ritual of building a fire, the warmth it provided, the simple pleasure of it all. These weren't just practical matters anymore. They were symbols of autonomy and freedom, reminders that I had fought for my right to enjoy my home and won. The story of the HOA president who went to war over fireplace smoke became a teaching moment for the entire community. It prompted other HOAs in the area to review their governance structures and procedures. Some made changes to prevent similar situations. Others recognized warning signs in their own board members and addressed issues before they escalated. In a way, the ordeal served a purpose beyond my individual situation. It shed light on a larger problem with some HOAs and contributed, in a small way, to broader awareness and reform. I didn't set out to be any kind of activist or crusader, but that's what happened nonetheless. As I sit here now, many years later, with a fire burning in my fireplace and snow falling outside my window, I can reflect on the whole experience with clarity and perspective. It was terrible at the time. It was stressful and scary and made me question whether I'd made a mistake buying in an HOA neighborhood. But it also brought unexpected gifts. It connected me with neighbors who became true friends. It taught me valuable lessons about documentation, persistence, and standing up for oneself. It showed me that most people are reasonable and supportive when given the facts, and it gave me a story that still entertains and educates people years later. Would I go through it again? Absolutely not. Would I change what happened? If I could go back and prevent Brenda's mental health decline and all the damage she caused to herself and others, yes, I would. But given the reality of what occurred, I can honestly say I handled it as well as I possibly could have. The smoke rises from my chimney tonight just as it did on that morning when Brenda first came to my door in outrage. It rises clean and true, dispersing into the winter air, causing no harm, violating no laws, and serving its simple purpose of venting the heat that keeps my home warm. And that's exactly as it should be.